So we know that Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party here in Canada are involved in a lot of violations and a lot of ethics dilemmas that are dealing right now that are being come into light for the general public. We're seeing a lot of articles being produced of certain ministers or cabinet positions that are um, either involved in some horrible business practice, or they're involved in criminality or whatnot. But nothing has been more scathing than the employment minister here in Canada in this new in this situation here. So this is from the National Post. It says a company that belonged to federal employment minister Randy Boissonnault said it was Indigenous owned while bidding on federal contracts. And now, so he said that his company, he lied about his being Indigenous, saying it was Indigenous owned to get contracts. Seems like a very Liz Warren kind of situation. Remember how she said she was part Native to get into, I think it was Harvard, some Ivory school. She was trying to get applications into that, and then that turned out to be a farce, and then Trump picked on her on that, calling her Pocahontas. It seems like a similar situation. Now, Boissonnault faces new scrutiny over his statements on his family's indigeneity. This is from the CBC. Employment minister says he's not Indigenous. Experts say past statements appear contradictory. Well, he said he was to get federal contracts. He said he was to get federal contracting. But now, oh, look at that. I guess I wasn't. Amazing I could just turn like that. Amazing I could just automatically just pick an identity, play this Wheel of Fortune game of who I want to be to get good business measures. So it goes on to say Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault is set to face a new round of questions over his business dealings and family history as a parliamentarian committee in the wake of a report that his former company claimed to be Indigenous owned while bidding for federal contracts in 2020. The minister, an Edmonton MP, has been tied up in multiple probes into past business dealings for months. The medical supplies company co-founded, Global Health Import, became mirrored in lawsuits, scandal, and probes into whether Boissonnault continued to work with the company after becoming a cabinet minister, which would be illegal. Boissonnault has denied all allegations and has claimed his former business partner, Stephen Anderson, was working without his consent to advance his personal interests. A story published in the National Post last week prompted a closer look into what Boissonnault has said about his family's Indigenous links and how that he said about his family has shifted over time. While Boissonnault's spokesperson has said he had never claimed to be Indigenous himself, well, the National Post said otherwise, including himself, others, including the Liberal Party, have claimed it on his behalf. In 2015, the Liberal Party's Indigenous Peoples Commission, an internal party group that promotes the interests of Indigenous Party members, identified Boissonnault as one of the 10 Indigenous Liberal candidates elected into the House of Commons. The claim was repeated on the social media platform Instagram. In 2019, the Liberal Party told CBC News that Boissonnault was Indigenous, but 5 weeks after an article listed the number of Indigenous candidates were published, the Liberal Party sent a clarification stating that Boissonnault does not claim Indigenous heritage. The party said the information identifying Boissonnault as Indigenous came from a staff error. A staff error. I forgot my roots. I forgot who I was. I guess my staff made that error. At a time, the Liberal Party said Boissonnault's mother was Cree. During a hearing of the Parliamentary Language Committee, Boissonnault said his Cree name means strong eagle man. His spokesperson said the name was given to him by an elder in 2021. At a Heritage Committee hearing, Boissonnault referred to his Cree great-grandmother, Lucy Brown Eyes. Boissonnault now says his mother is Métis. Some experts are skeptical. I think we ought to know who our mother is, said Michelle Good, a retired lawyer and author and member of the Red Pheasant Cree Nation. It's very concerning to me because there seem to be some significant discrepancies similar to what we see with other cases of identity fraud. So that's from a lawyer representing Cree Nations. Boissonnault spokesperson Alice Hansen said that the minister's mother and brother registered in the past year as citizens of the Métis Nation of Alberta. She said that before they could be accepted, they had to provide personal information documentation. Hansen said the Boissonnault self-identified as a non-status adopted Cree at the suggestion of an Indigenous researcher. It was an explanation of his adopted family's Indigenous history as they understood it at the time, she said in a media statement. Boissonnault has not been a member of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus. The caucus identifies itself as a caucus of MPs who are First Nation, Métis, and Inuit nations and have been elected from ridings across Canada throughout Turtle Island. Boissonnault said he sat in that caucus as an ally to represent Alberta and the large urban Indigenous population in his constituency. Oh, so he's an ally. First he went from being a member, being Indigenous, to not being Indigenous, to being the wrong kind of Indigenous, to now just being an ally. Does he ever get whiplash just from changing his appearance and persona and his family roots? Do you ever just get whiplash? Like, oh, today I'm Irish, today I'm Italian, today I'm this. Maybe he took his advice from Andrew Cuomo. I am a New Yorker. I am gay. I am this. I think he's also a gay man too. So that's another thing to add to this. Not that it matters. On Friday, he said left the caucus in 2021. However, he was still listed as a member of the Liberal Party's website. So here's some other interesting stories. So there's been a lot of ethics violations. There's a lot of identity fraud with this particular character. Like I said, if you look at the trajectory of the Liberal Party and the caucuses and the different MPs that are involved in this and different Trudeau scandals, there is a lot to be dug up on this. There's a lot to be dug up. We're just barely scratching the surface of things like SNC-Lavalin with the We Day scandal, with Trudeau's financing of a New York condo. So much that has just wrecked the integrity of these people and trying to represent Canada while doing these heinous business practices. So one of them, for years, Liberals said this MP was not Indigenous. He's not. The Liberal Party advised Employment Minister Randy Boissonnault as an Indigenous MP among the largest members of Indigenous MPs ever elected. Here's another thing. Cabinet Minister's firm shared mailing address with person named in cocaine bus. That was just recently. The first one's from November 14th. This is from November 18th. They found mailing addresses and using a person's identity that was also used in cocaine bus. Wow. Just how crazy that is. So here is in the House of Commons, one of the members of the Conservative Party pointed this out because there was a few critics at question period that were calling this out. They were saying that there's a bunch of violations on this guy, that there was a lot of explanation and something needs to be done about this. So she's going to bring this to attention. I'm blanking on the name. I know she represents somewhere in Alberta, I do believe, but she's going to bring it to attention. And watch how the Speaker of the House, Greg Fergus, responding to this. Watch.
Stemming from a quote in the National Post from a Cree lawyer who noted that the Minister of Employment committed identity fraud when he falsely claimed Indigenous heritage. The minister's company falsely claimed Indigenous ownership and subsequently received government contracts. What word would you suggest Indigenous persons use to describe the minister?
That's, I'm not certain if that's a point of order. The point of order which I was going to be coming to the honourable member of Calgary Nose Hill was that she had used the term, which is not appropriate in this place, to call another honourable member fraudulent.
So the Speaker of the House of Commons is shutting down Michelle Gardner, Rampart Gardner, because she used the word fraudulent, that the minister is accused of fraudulent behavior, identifying as an Indigenous member when he clearly isn't. This has been explained throughout the media. We just read the articles there. People are aware of this. And the House Speaker, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Greg Fergus, as you're seeing here, is telling her, you can't use that term. You can't use fraudulent. And her rebuttal is, well, what can I use? What do you call someone that uses the identity of Indigenous to further his career or embellishes further higher up in the career ladder and abuses that and takes it for granted and makes fraudulent statements on his family origins? What do you call that? You would call that fraudulent. But the Speaker of the House is trying to diminish that. And watch how this escalates.
As it happened during question period, another honourable member did the same thing and withdrew the comment. I invite the honourable member from Calgary Nose Hill to please simply withdraw the use of that word in reference to a specific member of Parliament and a colleague of all of ours.
As recorded in the Hansard on February 9th, 2023, the member from Mirabel referred to the Prime Minister as a fraud. No admonishment was issued. Why are you admonishing me today?
This is not a debate.
So she's reading statements based off of people within the Indigenous community and lawyers representing the Indigenous community that are accusing the minister of fraudulence. It's not that she's just blatantly making a smear attack or dissing him. Oh, you're a fraudulent. No, she's deliberately she's using quotes and message and statements made by people within the Indigenous communities, by lawyers representing them, saying you are accused of fraudulent behavior because you're using our identity to elevate your career status, to get you into Parliament, to get you the higher stature. Oh, you're one of the now one of the largest Indigenous caucuses in Canada history. Oh, we could celebrate that, even though he's a fraud. He is a fraud. On top of all the other violations of ethics, violations of his business persona, violations of just the heinous regard of this person, the heinous regard of the Ministry of Employment. Think about that. He's the Ministry of Employment, and he makes a fraudulent statement about himself, claiming Indigenous status to elevate his career. Think about how crazy that is.
I'm asking the honourable member if she would please please withdraw the simple comment on the use of that word in reference to another honourable member.
So he keeps saying, oh, you got to retract that statement. You got to retract that phrase. You can't use fraudulent. So what can you use? What can you say when someone falsely identifies as an Indigenous person to elevate their career? You would call that fraudulent. That is fraud. That is the correctable term. That is the legal term. But what the Speaker of the House is doing is trying to block that. The Speaker of the House is trying to block that to protect that guy. Because, we can't call him fraudulent. We can't call him fraudulent because if people knew about him being fraudulent, that would be a problem. That would be a violation. That would be something concerning that, hey, maybe he needs to step down.
Mr. Speaker, I was quoting an Indigenous person as it pertained to identity fraud by the minister.
One last time, I'm going to ask the honourable member if she would please withdraw the use of that word in reference to a particular member.
Oh my God.
I do not see the honourable member rising. Ms. Rempel-Garner, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to the authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you now to withdraw from the House from any participation by video conference or by electronic voting system.
So they kick her out. They kick her out of the House of Commons for accurately stating that the Minister of Employment made fraudulent claims, which is exactly what he did. And the House Speaker is claiming that she's violating the authority of the chair. She's violating the authority that he is presiding over, and demanding her, you can't say fraudulent. You can't say fraudulent. How dare you say something about the Minister of Employment? How dare the Minister of Employment claim to be Indigenous when he wasn't? To build up his career, to embellish himself. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because you're a fraudster. Exactly the point she's making. And she's making that point not from just her terms, but also lawyers representing those nations, representing Indigenous people, representing Indigenous Canadians that feel like they just got duped over by this buffoon who's now the Minister of Employment based on fraudulent claims that he's one of them. Like, no wonder why they're angry. No wonder why they're pissed off. No wonder why the lawyer had to say something about this. And now you got Michelle Gardner speaking about this, and she gets kicked out. She gets kicked out. So here is... So here's Rebel News pointing this out. 3, not just her, 3 Conservative MPs, Michelle Rempel-Gardner, Michael Barrett, and Rick Perkins, were kicked out of the House of Commons by Speaker Greg Fergus over comments calling Environmental Minister Randy Boissonnault a fake Indigenous fraudster. I thought he was the Employment Minister. Or maybe... I'm pretty sure he's the Employment Minister, so maybe that's a... So maybe Rebel News didn't get that right, but they were kicked out. 3 of them. 3 of them. For pointing out the obvious fraud that this man has committed. The obvious fraud that Randy Boissonnault committed. So now here is the CBC. The CBC is going to cover it, and they bring on a representative of the Indigenous Métis or the Indigenous Cree to talk about this, and even they are saying that this man needs to be let go. This guy needs to step down because of the fraudulent claims that he's made, the ethics violations, how he got into this power, how he got into the position that he's in right now is a complete violation and an absolute disgrace of our people. So listen to this.
Some MPs have said what Minister Boissonnault has said publicly is grounds for him to resign. What do you think?
I think ignorance is not an excuse. I believe he's claiming to be an Indigenous company. So if somebody's doing something on his behalf, he should have been aware. So I think ignorance is not an excuse and he should resign.
So you believe that he should no longer be a minister of the Crown at this moment? You're calling for his resignation?
Well, if that's the case on this one issue, then what are the other issues that may be out there in regards to how he conducts himself and his business?
I will get...
I mean, if it's not the fraudulent claims of being a Indigenous person or his staff making those claims, then there's a lot of other violations on him. How about the fact that he's using fraudulent mailing addresses of Coke Bus? How about that? How about his wrongdoing right now as Minister of Employment, allowing a bunch of illegals storming into Canada and siphoning away jobs from Canadians, in part with big corporations that are exploiting these people. And I don't blame the immigrants. I don't blame the people coming into it. They're the ones being exploited, and we're the ones being exploited for large business corporations like Tim Hortons, for example, to stymie away from hiring Canadians at a substantial wage and give them benefits. They're now giving, allowing people to come in and giving them scab wages, exploiting them, not giving them the opportunity, not treating them as employees. They're temporary workers, so we don't have to pay them as much. Exploiting the system. Shouldn't that be called for a resignation? I'm just saying, there's a lot of things that we can talk about for him to finally step down, which, guess what? He finally did. As of this morning that I caught before going on live, Boissonnault out of cabinet to focus on clearing the allegations, Trudeau announces. He's going to build a chart wheel. He's going to draw like a family tree that's going to be like a zigzag spiraling, like it'll be like one of those chalkboards of, of serial killers trying to connect the dots. Like, oh, okay, so first I was a Métis. No, first I was Cree. Then I went Métis. Now I'm not, but I'm also this. Now I'm not this, but I'm also this. And this guy told me this. And then I became a cabinet minister in the Indigenous caucus. And then I didn't. And then this. And then that. But there you go, folks. He's out of office. And this is just one of many ministers that have outrageous violations and dilemmas that should be brought to attention. I mean, the Trudeau administration, the Trudeau cabinetcy, the parliamentarian. I mean, you've seen how it operates. You've seen how it works. The fact that they applied for a Nazi twice, and falsely said they didn't know about it. They didn't know who this guy was. They didn't realize this guy was partaking in the slaughter of Jews and Polish people back in the day. Yeah, there's a lot of digging to do in this cabinetry in Justin Trudeau's reign. And right now, with all this, on top of Trump's win in the United States, on top of a Canadian population that is just absolutely just disgusted by all this, their time is up. Their time is ticking, and they don't know what to do.